This morning, I woke up to a series of comments coming in from Facebook about an upcoming webinar that I'm a part of. I'm a part of a panel of experts on sexual coercion, marital coercion, sexual intimacy. It's called Isn't Having Sex My Right? And this person started right off with a typical attack saying that any person who's in a relationship, any woman, she was being specific about women, any women who doesn't show up and keep her man pleased, then it's understandable why that man would then leap out and have other relationships, that he should in fact do so because there's something wrong with her. And it got me really back interested into our belief about men and women's sexuality, about intimacy, about the way that we connect. And it reminded me, and I don't know if you're familiar with this author's work, but if you aren't, you really should. Sexologist, psychologist, Emily Nagoski's Come As You Are. She has both of a book and a workbook that I highly recommend. Come As You Are, Emily Nagoski, Nagoski, Emily Nagoski. And she talks about it. In fact, I love the way she starts her book. She starts her book saying, "You've been lied to." So I had just posted a video saying that. You've been lied to. The beliefs that we have about women and men's sexuality is wrong. It's false. It's been based upon male functioning and male sexuality, and we've assumed that women are just like men and women are not just like men. But it also assumes that women are different than men in some key ways. So I want to open today by talking about that, and how does it relate to abuse? Well, how it gets related to abuse is that we end up gaslighting women and relegating their intimacy, their intimate experience to some sideline as if it's not important, when really it is. And yet we place all this emotional responsibility for sexuality by saying, if your man's not happy and then you're not doing a good job, sweetheart. You need to be showing up better. You need to be there whether you want to be there or not. And he has no accountability to talk about what's going wrong with why you're not interested, because we all know, honey, you aren't interested like he is, but it is your job to keep him happy, which is a terrible false assumption. So I want to dive into it. And there's also another piece, and I know this is controversial, and it's something we don't talk a lot about on TikTok. I have not made it my platform, although I wrote a book about it. We don't talk about sexual addiction. Is it a real thing? What's all that about? Are there female sex addicts and male sex addicts? Are they all narcissists? I know there's a sexual narcissist, a somatic narcissist. That's one subtype of narcissism. But is every person who has an issue with sex a narcissist? So I'd love to talk about that as well. So let me introduce myself to you. I'm Dr. Kerry McAvoy. Yes, I'm wearing a blonde wig today. I decided to mix it up and look different. You'll also see me wearing a auburn pixie that I've got coming too. I'm going to be interchanging between colors just because it's fun. Why not? Why can't I do that, right? Since I wear wigs, I might as well embrace the wig life. So isn't this a cute one? I'm real happy with it. It's an Envy. For anybody who wears wigs and want to know what brand it is, it's an Envy wig, and synthetic, which I really like so it's a little less care, but means it has a little less shelf life. So anyway, probably too much about wigs and colors and stuff. I'm going to put on my glasses so I can see you guys better. But thanks for commenting on that. I normally we don't talk about what I look like or any of that kind of thing. But let's talk about some rules of the room. This is a place where we talk about mental health issues. We talk about anything related to relationships, what's healthy relationships. We don't talk about politics. We don't talk about religion, although sometimes I do get into that. Just because it ties into narcissistic abuse or abusive relationships. But today I want to mostly talk about sexual intimacy, about intimacy, physical intimacy, how to have better, why are we not having better sex, what's going wrong. Some of my thoughts as a psychologist about why I think we're having problems, how it ties into abusive relationships, because if you're aware of the love bombing phase, physical intimacy is brought in as a first part of it, as a way to kind of cement the relationship, to get all those biological, chemical hormones working in the benefit of the person who's doing the love bombing. So they often introduce rapid physical intimacy as a way to connect you to them, kind of finish the bonding. But I want to talk about that because I know both men and women have a whole lot to say about sex, about what's happening or not happening in the bedroom. And I also know there's a lot of false assumptions. one of the things I want to kick it off, and if you have a comment for me today, and by the way, Instagram, I can now see you again. I can see what you're saying. Put your thumbs up in front of your comments. So I'm live right now, both on Instagram and TikTok. So put your comments with a thumb up ahead of it, so I know that you're talking to me. Or you're asking me a question and we can dive into that. I'm going to be leaning heavily into Emily Nagoski's work and what I also know about David Snarf's work. You've heard me refer to him before. He wrote the book called The Passionate Marriage, which is basically a sex guide. It's all about how to have he calls it mind-blowing sex in his book. So there's a big, wonderful, thick book by David Snarf, Schnarch. It's called The Passionate Marriage. I highly think of that book. It's an awesome book about how to have better intimacy, better life. But Emily's very good about understanding what desire, low libido, how we're tied together, what acts as inhibitors and acts as exciters in our relationship with each other. So I strongly recommend Emily Nagoski's work as well. So if you want to ask me a question, make sure to put a thumbs up. Yeah, it's interesting because Pearl's already talking about testosterone. What part is testosterone play in this? Yes, both, by the way, are you aware that both men and women have testosterone levels? Women are not to be zero. We're never zero. And also women's other hormones involved in women's sexuality plays a part in our interest and desire. So, just because we may not have the same levels of testosterone as men do does not mean that we have less of an interest than men do. I think one of the biggest things that we mistaken, and this is what Emily says right at the get-go of this book, is that most of the research up till recently has been based upon male sexuality, and then they've made an assumption that because this is the way a man works, that this is how women works, when really we're very different in what causes excitation, interest, desire. But that to say that women have less of a desire and less of an interest isn't necessarily true. And one of the points that she makes right off the bat is that for some, can be like a visual experience, what we see or maybe what we've been thinking about. But for others, it happens in the moment. It's part of a process. It's a response. So maybe some of us are not great initiators. That doesn't necessarily mean that we're not interested. It may mean that what excites us is different. It may not be extraneous stuff. It may be what's happening in the relationship that causes the excitement. And if there's not a emphasis on both, if it's not approached in a holistic way, so sexuality is really driven by what's happening around you, what's happening inside of you, and what's happening inside of the relationship. And if we don't kind of include all of this at the same time, then we're going to end up being off cue. Because you may be somebody who's very driven by what's happening around you, by what you see, but maybe you're in a relationship with someone who's very driven by what's happening in the relationship. And if there's not a lot of emphasis being put on the relationship and keeping connected, then there isn't going to be a strong drive, a strong need to get together. And this is the other really good point. A lot of women, if we're staying at home, we're taking care of the kids, not all of us do, but if we have a lot of responsibility, then it's very hard for there to be a space for us then to have the energy to show up. So how is the relationship being balanced? Is there an effort to make sure that both partners' energy and mental space is in a healthy place so that we can connect in a good way? There needs to be equal focus on that. I think, again, this false assumption that sexual intimacy primarily is a man's need, not a woman's need, causes us not to put the right kind of energy into preserving the relationship so that both partners can approach it in the space of let's put energy into us and keep us healthy. It needs to be like that. So that's a whole lot to say about that. I'd love to hear more what you're thinking. What kind of, is this something you're struggling with? What kind of biases have you been running into? I would really love to know, where are your issues around that? I know that somebody just commented a little bit ago that if you're in an abusive relationship, which already, if it's not emotionally safe for you to be you, then how in the world do you think you're going to be physically safe to show up to express you? You're not. You're going to feel scared and threatened. You're going to be shut down and pulled back as a result of that. So there's already one big ding. But the other point that this person was making is that that then the stress hormones, the cortisol, and all that goes into that starts to wear a person down who's being abused, then they're going to have their body's in survival mode. It's not going to be in the best space for them to be, oh, I want to take risks and invest in you. Instead, it's focusing on how do we deal with this fight or flight situation. So you're right. Obviously, that's going to have a very serious detrimental effect on the experience, physical experience. So make sure to put a thumbs up in front of it so I can know that you're talking to me. Callie just said, I feel men want it just for satisfaction and women want it for mental excitement. Here's a question, and I know I'm going to get probably a lot of this. This is controversial. So I hear you guys talking to each other in the background there. It is one of the controversial things is what is actually sexual intimacy and what creates safety for sexual intimacy. And boy, I hope I don't get into trouble with TikTok for talking about all of this. I feel like we've been getting a little safer to talk about it, but I just know somebody who's gotten really in trouble. Thank you guys I decided to go blonde, but I also am going to go redhead. So you'll see me play around lots of different colors. But yeah, what creates safety for sexual intimacy? One of the things that is I think is having a huge a negative effect is the way that we objectification of women. So here's an interesting thought. When we walk around the world, all around us, when we see people out and about, do you see them as fodder for intimacy, for our fantasy? So in other words, when you go back and you think, oh, I saw a real hot whatever, hot abs, I saw hot whatever, good looking woman, good looking man, does that then become part of your fantasy life later on in your privacy of your home, when you're home? Well, when we do that, and if you're in a relationship with another person and the other person's not the object of your desire, and you're not seeing the whole person as a person, that's going to show up in the relationship. That person knows you're not with them. When you're with them, you know what I mean? When you're with them, they know that you're not with them. You're with somebody else in your head. And I feel like there's been just the way that we sort of view our body integrity and our body rights has gotten very, very skewed. And I lived with a sex addict, guys. I lived with somebody I was married to him for 2 years and I knew him for 3 years. And he actually called women around him meat. Women were meat. When we have this idea that a sex, whether it's male or female, is not really a person, a whole object, somebody with dreams, hopes, and relationships with other people, but they're just for our satisfaction, they become a consumable. And that's then our intimacy becomes part of a transaction. We've made them something that we just then use and then discard. They're not, we don't really see them and experience it in a full, rich way. It really actually, in a way, becomes something kind of a, 1 or 2 dimensional. Yeah, Brittany, if you want to start a poll, if you think of a provocative question to ask her on this, I would love to see what people are thinking about it, because I would love to know how many of you think that you've ever been in a relationship where you were objectified and not really seen as a real person, and what was the experience of that for you. And how many of you, I would love to know. So there's lots of different angles we could take this polling on the questionnaire. By the way, for Instagram, what happens on TikTok is we're able to ask each other questions and take a poll and see what people are thinking. Yeah, I love improving trucker dad bod. By the way, dad bod, I love that. I love even the fact that you even talk about that. I love the fact that your object of desire is a person you're in a relationship. That's awesome. Yeah, I sadly, one of the things I'm coming to realize as I prepare for this webinar is that I was always in a sexually coercive relationship. I've always been in one. I don't even know if I know what it would be like to be not and be one. I've been objectified most of my life. I mean, for those of you who know my story, I was raped at 4. So that was a relationship that lasted for 2 years, ongoing, which was horrific. And then I was in an environment that was predatory, very, very predatory. And then I got married to a really great guy, but he didn't understand the fact that the sexuality wasn't very equal, and he didn't really know how to show up and was present, so it was more coercive. And then I ended up marrying a sex addict who was really not into sex with me. He was just into sex, and actually I was there for other reasons, and I wasn't for sex, that's for sure. So I find that kind of sad. So for me, and this is the part that I hate the fact that I'm talking about something that I can imagine that I believe it should be, but it isn't something based on my own life experience. My life experience has been tragedy after tragedy of what's gone wrong. But I think what's happened for me is what's happened to a lot of women. I just heard somebody was playing, it was Dateology was getting ready for a podcast. They found somebody, I think it's called Rad Dad or something like that. There's some person on TikTok who posted a one about how his wife locks the door when she takes a shower. And he gets in her face about why would she lock the door while taking a shower. I understand why she locked the door when she's taking a shower. I think I've locked the door when I'm taking a shower, especially with a more coercive relationship, because this person wouldn't back off. And any time that I was not clothed, he acted like it was, sexual. And for me, it was like, I'm just showering, dude. Can we just focus on I'm shaving my legs? I don't really want to be looked at like that. So I think that we need to understand, in fact, it's becoming popular that women having boundaries is masculine. Do we even know what boundaries are? Boundaries is simply my skin. That's a boundary. So you're saying I'm not to have skin? An emotional boundary is the same. It's a mental space of saying, this is my space. It's like you guys buy a property, right? You know where the property lines are. You'd want to know where your line starts and your neighbor's stops, right? You wouldn't even buy a property that didn't have a survey that didn't tell you that. Why then is it wrong for women and men to say, this is my boundary? I don't really want you in my space. And I have periods of time that are private spaces that I really need to sort of care for myself, take care of my own needs. That's what this is about. To say women don't have a right is to say women aren't a self. If you say there's no boundaries, there's no selfhood. Literally, my skin is a boundary. You're saying I can't be me? I can't have my space, me, my privacy, my life, my thoughts, my dreams. You're saying I'm not, that's masculine? No, that's hogwash. That's just more abuse. It's just another way to be controlling of one group from another. Somebody asked a question. Jane asked over on Instagram, my ex-boyfriend turned out to be a covert narcissist. Oops, I'm sorry. And he has, I have to do the erectile dysfunction and couldn't perform, and he was addicted to porn. Yeah, that's a common problem. So I need to find a better system so I can read behind the phone. I have the phone in front of the phone. But anyway, yeah, in fact, what I have noticed, and this is a theory of mine. It's not based on research, guys. This is the theory of mine. I think if you see pretty tremendous impotence or problems, sexual problems, dysfunction in the man in your life, chances are this person is using a lot of pornography and he's doing a lot of masturbation. And there's a desensitization so that typical sexual experiences is no longer pleasurable, or it has the same kind of sensitivity, so it's not as a good of an experience. I've noticed that in fact the rates of erectile dysfunction is going up into much younger men, and I think that it's directly contributed to excessive activity, private activity, and as a result there's actually kind of a loss of nerve sensitivity, which is then cause a lack of interest or a lack of being able to show up in an intimate relationship, a more vaginal relationship, vaginal intercourse experience, which is sad. Now, the good news is according to those who say that this is a thing, and I know that this is even controversial and not all of you will agree with me, but those who have been in these circles and see this type of population who treat sexual addiction say that if there's total abstinence for upwards to 90 days, thank you, there's not theories, studies. Yeah, the problem is nobody wants to talk about this. No one wants to come out and say this is research-based, and partly because sexual addiction is not an identifiable DSM-5 criteria, so therefore let me explain something. Just because what psychology and psychiatry base is as a diagnostic category is based upon what we say the clinical Bible, which is the DSM-5, says. So if it's in the DSM-5, then insurance recognizes it as a diagnosis and then will pay for it. And because it's recognized by the government and by insurance, then there's research money that it's afforded then to look into better treatment for it. Does that follow? So we say, let's pretend, let's make something up. Let's say that there is a supernatural phenomenon where we start to see ghosts and we decide it's a real condition. I have a fear of ghosts. Let's just pretend I have a fear of ghosts. And it's a real condition, and we see lots of people starting to say they have a fear of ghosts. So they begin to say, oh, this is a real thing. And they list it in the DSM-5 as fear of ghosts. And now, because it's listed, we'll reimburse when you come in and say, I suffer from a fear of ghosts. Insurance will say, yes, we'll pay for that. We'll help off-write that. That's a real legitimate thing. And because it's identified with a code and seen as a real thing, then you can go out and research fear of ghosts. We can have all sorts of money. We can have universities that say, let's understand what this fear of ghost thing is about so that we can help have a better treatment for it, right? So what's happened is the whole thing about sexual addiction is that nobody wants to say it's a real thing. So interestingly enough, internationally, the WHO, with the World Health Organization, says it's real. Oh, isn't that interesting? So we just did a poll of, were you objectified more than cherished, and how much of the time? All the time? 50% of the time? Or you can't relate? 50% of you say it's all the time. And if we combine the more than 50% of the time to all the time, 87.5% of us say we've been objectified. Guys, wow, that's like, wow. That's incredible. Thank you, Brittany. That's fascinating. So the women commenting, and I'm assuming it's women, saying 87% of women feel objectified sexually 50 or more percent of the time. And we wonder why. Do you understand what the ramification is and why we're so scared to show up? Why we're kind of hunkering down, and why then sex doesn't go well in the relationship? I mean, yeah, it has huge ramifications. But let me go back to about sexual addiction. So interestingly enough, the World Health Organization has included it as in 2011, said, yes, it's a real thing. It's a real condition, but the United States has not. We persist in saying we don't want to see it, because then that means we have to then find treatment for it and begin to figure out really what it is. If you want to know a really good researcher in this topic, and I think he's cutting edge and one of the best out there, it's Omar Minwalla, Minwalla. Omar Minwalla. He's out of Los Angeles area in California. He started into this whole arena of sexual abuse, sexual addiction by looking first at predators. He was working with sexual offenders in the court system, found out that what we've been ignoring all the victims, the families, the wives, the partners of these people, and began to look at what happens when somebody becomes a sexual predator. How does it affect the relationship when there's a secret sexual life? And then he's been looking into this ramification, doing really cutting edge work on it. So it's Omar Minwalla. He doesn't have a book out, but he has some papers. One's called the White Paper. So yeah, if you really want to follow him, he's fascinating, really awesome stuff. Omar Minwalla. But so what happens then is, because we don't see men and women as both sexually interested, because then there's been this plethora since the 1970s when pornography became legalized and it was allowed to be, there's a big court case with Larry Flint, and all of that started to happen. We essentially have turned in one, not that there's not men sexual objects too, but for the most part, the industry is can't say that word today, it's based on women. It's being driven more by objectification of women than it is objectification of men. I'm not saying it's not happening of men. Yes, it happens to men. Yes, very much so. But it's primarily focusing on women. And most sex addicts, I think the percentages are, trying to remember, but I think it's like upward to 80+% are men more than men and women. It's not really a very equal it's not really something that both sexes struggle equally with. Is there female sex addicts? Absolutely. I would say they're more love addicts or relationship addicts, but men tend to struggle more with sexual addiction specifically. I know a lot about it because I was married to one. I ended up in a treatment center. We went to treatment for it, and I also then joined a group for sexual partners of sexual addicts. Have been a part of that group for years, and then actually after I got out of that relationship, the first thing I did was I joined a sexual betrayal trauma group for over a year. Did 3 hours of therapy intensively for help recovering from the betrayal trauma of being in a relationship with a sex addict. So as though I don't talk a lot about it, although it's in the title of my book, Love You More, The Harrowing Tales of Lies, Sex Addiction, and Double Cross, it is something I have a lot of experience with personally, as well as because I'm a clinician, a mental health specialist. But yeah, we don't really want it. In fact, I find myself struggling to talk about it here today. Believe it or not, this is not a comfortable topic. I feel really edgy. I have strong opinions, but I feel very scared to say what my opinions are. One of them is I think pornography is horrifically damaging. I remember reading an article about a sexologist who used to recommend couples use pornography to strengthen their relationship. She came out after a few years and said, no, she doesn't recommend that anymore because what's happening in pornography is that violence is being wed with sex. So that sex and violence is becoming kind of like, on top of each other. The other thing is that whatever you engage, repetitively with, you're creating a bond with. So if you're having a lot of like release and holding your phone, you're actually kind of making a connection with your phone and your screen of your phone. You're not connecting with another human being. It needs to be a relational experience. It needs to be something that happens with somebody, not something that happens alone. And here's the other thing we don't talk about. The person that you're watching has agreed to be an object for you. They're doing it for pay. Yeah, it's a very lucrative business. I actually wrote erotica. I know how to write erotica. I write marital erotica. If you're interested, let me know, and I'd be happy to tell you how to find it so you can read it. It's public. I put it out there publicly. I find sexual, all of that fascinating. But what's happened is that we've taken it out of the context of relationship and act like it's a solitary activity. I don't believe it's a solitary activity. It's made for a relationship. That's why you fantasize about somebody. You're not fantasizing about yourself or about your feet or about your hands. You're fantasizing about another person. We're built to be in relationship with somebody, but what happens is that pornography allows us to take outside of that and act as if it's nobody's business is about our own. But it's not anybody's. The person who you're observing, unless you've gotten, permission to which they give you by letting themselves be filmed. They've allowed themselves to be filmed or imaged. They're giving you permission to fantasize about them, but you've then entered into a relationship with that person. They've given it without ever meeting you. Yes, you can think of me this way. I'm okay with that. Just pay me. I'm okay with that. And then you say, yes, I think you're fascinating. I think you're really very fascinating. And I like that. I want to think about you that way. So thank you for that. It's an interchange that you just had without any conversation. I don't know if you've ever realized that. So now, and that's why people who are around you who are who think they're in a monogamous relationship find out you're doing that. They feel betrayed because in their mind, they thought they were your sexual desire. You're the object of your love. And they find out, oh no, she or he or they or whoever it is not the person who thinks they're in a relationship with you. So it's a betrayal of that person. That's why, why would they be all upset? Well, because they thought that there was a connection, that this was something, that it was an exclusive connection between the two of you. And now that they found out it's not an exclusive, and you probably didn't tell them that either. That you probably didn't tell them, hey, I'm really into feet and I really like these accounts for these reasons. You had this and you kept it to yourself, and you've been fantasizing about other people who have given you permission or not. And now your partner's found out that they've been betrayed, that what they thought you two had isn't what it was, what you led them to believe. So in a way, you've kind of, it's a form of omission, lying of omission. And then there's gaslighting. That's the other part that's so toxic about sexual coercion and marital coercion. When one of the person's desire, so here's what happens. When this starts to happen on a long-term basis, this is what I see in the office. I get a person in my office, usually it's women, Women will come into my office and say, my sex drive is dropping. I'm not interested in sex anymore. Have a great relationship with my partner. He's a wonderful, or she's a really wonderful person. So I don't know what's wrong. We're good friends. We don't fight. I don't know what's wrong. And I'll say, I know what's wrong. Your partner is engaged with other people. Maybe not directly, maybe just with images or video, but they're engaging with other people. And so, yeah, or even anime. I know that's a big thing in Japan, by the way. Men are opting out of relationships to have a relationship with an anime figure. Seriously, they fall in love with these figures. It's so bizarre. So this person comes and says to me, my desires dropped. I don't know what's wrong. I'm just not interested. And I would say, you need to go do some digging, because I have a feeling your partner is not invested in you in the same way. Doesn't make you feel loved, safe. Safe's a big one, guys. We pick up on the lack of safety really fast. Our brain's built for survival. It's almost reptilian that way. So when we start to feel like something's threatening the relationship, threatening our safety, we become alert. And one of the things that happens is then, because we're no longer safe, we're certainly not going to risk anything that's vulnerable. And sexual expression is vulnerable. So we're not going to risk sexual expression because we're feeling not safe. And just see how that makes perfect sense. How many times have you ever been in a scary situation and you're sexually turned on? Not usually, right? It just doesn't happen that way. So they go home and they start to, ask around and check out, and they find out, sure enough, their partner's been involved in other things. They have disconnected the intimacy part from the relationship, and they're putting it elsewhere into their private life. So I'm going to get super crude on you for a second. How many orgasms can you have in a day? Do you want to have in a day? I've had men tell me they have upwards to 10 alone. 3 to 10. Okay, so you're going to come home and be invested in your partner after you've been doing that by yourself? You have the ability to do that? You have that much energy to do that? No, of course not. You've been siphoning it off. It's going somewhere else, not going into the relationship. It's going somewhere else. And then you want to know why there's no connection? And you want to know why your partner's not feeling safe enough to show up with you? Well, of course not. So the problem of sexuality is so complex, so complex, and there's so many parts to it. I think that's what really bothers me about when we place it all on, it's women. Women just need to show up and spread our legs and then everything would be better. No, there needs to be increased safety around all of us. There needs to be a way for us to be able to express ourselves, feel like that we can be, who we are. We need to know that our partner is crazy about us, loves us, wants to know us, is invested in us, has created space for us. We want that. They want that from us. They want us to do the same. So it's so important in all these different directions that all these pieces are there for us to have a really, really good sex life. Really good life. So how to rebuild that feelings of safety with ourselves? Well, I think first of all, we begin to ask ourselves who's in our life and are they creating safety for us? Are you allowed to take a shower alone and not feel spied on? Can you dress and have it not be sexual? Can you have a bad day and be able to say that to your partner and have them be able to hear that? And then, what permission do you have to be able to show up to the relationship sexually in a way that makes you feel like you're showing up instead of you keeping people happy? Are you taking the emotional responsibility for the relationship? Yeah, Princess just said, my boyfriend's a narcissist, and he gets mad if I try to bring up how I feel. It's seen as arguing. Yeah, that does not create safety. That then makes you feel like you have to keep yourself into a box, keep yourself small. So then how can you express yourself when you're in a box like that and you're walking on eggshells like that? Yeah, Brittany, Thriving in the Afternoon, says, my boundaries is I won't be with a man anymore who's more interested in fantasies than in me. Exactly. It's one of mine is, and that may mean that I'm single for the rest of my life, which, if it is I won't be in a relationship with a man who's engaging in pornography. I know right now it's probably nearly 100% of the time. So I understand that that's a problem. So how many of us, we just had another poll, how many of us experience any form of coercion in our life? And very regularly, 85, almost 86% of us said it's a regular problem in our relationship. And then there's another 14% that says once in a while. So in other words, what you guys have just said to me is that at least the people who are answering, and I'm assuming again, because most of my audience right now is women, we're saying nearly 100% of us have been coerced. 100%, nearly 100% of us have been coerced, that we show up in relationships because we're expected to show up, not because we feel safe to show up, not because we feel like we are excited to show up. We feel like to keep the things peaceful. Here's what I knew in my relationship. And this is, like I said, I've been really sick to realize this as I get ready for this seminar. And I hope you guys are coming. You guys coming to the webinar, Isn't Having Sex My Right? Please, you need to sign up for it. It's going to be a sexologist. It's going to be myself. There's going to be a reformed dad. There's also a pastor offering spiritual perspective. It's going to be an incredible time. So the link is in my bio. I'd love to see you there. It's October 20th. Really, we need to be talking about this. Instead of being so angry and screaming at each other, we need to be having these dialogues. And that's why I see men over on Instagram. I have more men who are here today than men here on this platform on TikTok. I'm thrilled because I think the way to get through this, to get to the other side, is we need to be talking to each other and coming together and showing up so that we can have a better intimacy. I want to be excited. I want you to be excited. I think most of us feel that way. Most genders want both parties happy. I want my partner happy, very, very much so. The webinar is in the link in my bio. It's online. So I'm super excited about that. So improving trucker dad bod said, I've never known women to be coerced unless they're lying or manipulative. Well, I'll tell you that's a great question. So let's talk about that. What do women mean when we feel coerced? This is how it happened in mine. Mine would come home from work. He's worked hard. By the way, I worked too. And I also took care of the house. So I worked part-time and then took care of the house full-time, all of it, everything. So I was doing a job and a half, seriously. And it was my life that was interrupted if the kids got sick, not his life. We made that agreement. I'm fine that we made that agreement. But he'd come home and he'd get, he'd say, it's been a while. That's what he'd say. He said, it's been a while. Okay, yeah, I know it's been a while. Maybe, and by the way, for him, a while is a few days, okay? We were very active. So a while was a few days. Not a week, not 2 weeks, never. We've never gone a month, never. I don't think we ever went 2 weeks, honestly. We just were very active. Anyway, do you know how often couples have sex in the relationship? It's about 2 times a week is the average. And as it gets older, it drops to about once a week. That's the statistics. So that's just to give you a ballpark. We were above average, okay? Just to give you framework. He would say it's been a while. So from his perspective, it'd been a while. And he'd get a little kind of pissy. And I knew that now the clock was ticking. And if I didn't show up soon, like in the next day or two, things are going to go south here. He's going to get surly to the kids, pissy to me, and going to grumble and be bitchy and depressed. And life would not be good in the house because he set the tone in the house when he was home. So I'd show up. I'd even though I was tired and I was exhausted, and he probably this guy didn't know how to have a conversation with me. So it wasn't ever he said, how are you doing, sweetheart? I didn't get that. He would hug me and cuddle me and, sweet that way, but he was not ever a conversationalist. So I was lonely. So it didn't matter. I was lonely. I was supposed to show up. And I did. I showed up. Then his mood would get better. And then life went better. And everybody was happy. And the house went smooth. And, it was good again. Things were good. As long as I showed up, things were good. That's what we mean by coercive. We feel this pressure, this weight. So over time, what happened was I just got less invested. Why should I be invested in having sex when I'm not terribly important? And by the way, here's the other really sad thing. I would say, can you kiss me like this? And he wouldn't. I don't know what you mean. I don't know what you want. Well, like this. Can you imagine if I was touching him in the wrong way and it didn't work and I kept acting dumb? How will that go over? Not good, right? So he just kind of ignored what I needed, ignored what pleased me. And I didn't really matter. What mattered is he was pleased. That's sexual coercion. We both genders need to show up and care. We need to be invested. What do you want? How do you want it? How can I make you happy? Can you show up and know what I want? What's going to make me happy and excited? And who would not want to spend more time doing that when there's that kind of investment on both parties, right? A lot. Things would be going lots better. But there wasn't, I know for him what it was. And this is the part that made me overlook it. He came from a terribly narcissistically abusive home, shamed horribly, was ridiculed horribly, and he was scared. He was scared to have me know him, scared to invest in risk. It was just too risky for him. And I felt bad about that. So for me, knowing it made me overlook it when I should have said, hey, I count. I should be pleased here just as much as you're pleased. He used to say, before he got sick, he would say to me, and we're in our 50s, he would say, I'm the luckiest man at the office. I know that nobody knows how great I have it at home and how wonderful you are and how incredible our intimate life is. I'm the luckiest man in the world. He used to say that, and he believed it. He was happy. I showed up and I kept him happy, but he didn't keep me happy. And I think a lot of women today are sad. We're tired and we're sad of this. And we want to be just as important in the bedroom as men are in the bedroom. Yeah, so I love Coco Love. You ask, why are men like this way? I think part of it is blindness. They've been allowed to be. They've not been taught anything different. I think we've done, and moms and society has done men an injustice by not teaching emotional sophistication. I think there's been a fear of intimacy, a fear of being vulnerable and sharing. It's just, I think it's very, very powerful that men have gotten good at hiding. Here's the other thing I've noticed, and this is something that I've noticed in the office. I noticed it for years. Men take all their feelings that they have, their sadness, their embarrassment, their disappointment, their frustration, and they either turn it into anger and become enraged, or they turn it into sex and sexualize it and then act it out and get their softer needs met through sex. We have not given them the space to talk about their feelings anywhere, everywhere, for them to be vulnerable and risk being. Look what we say to men, what men are told. You're a wussy, man up. All right, ladies, come on. We're making the feminine side, we're making the emotional side feminine, and therefore, who wants to be feminine? They don't want to be feminine. So then they just burn, and then they get introduced to pornography, and it's seen as it's okay, and pornography is all aggressive and wedded with violence, and then we think that's what women want, or women they don't matter, they don't even need to show up. There's just this whole realm of problems. So that's why I really love the fact that we're going to talk about this in this webinar of Isn't Having Sex My Right, but how to have better sex and how to have better intimacy and really to show up. And I strongly recommend, guys, if you haven't picked up Emily Nagoski's book, Come As You Are, it's about how to have better sexual pleasure in the bedroom, how to have the woman be more of a part of it. There's another site. I have not gone there because I've not been in a relationship to enjoy it. And so I don't really want to tease myself with something I can't have because I'm not sexually active at the moment. But there's a website called OMG Yes. I think it's .org or .com. I'll have to look. I'll put a link in my bio for you guys. And it's all how to have fantastic, mind-blowing intimacy for both men and women. It's very, 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 it's all about that. So it's incredible. Yeah. So I'm trying to pay attention to your comments, guys. And I know that I'm wishing that I could see more of what you guys are saying on the backside of Instagram. I need to find a better way to see both of your comments. Maybe that will help. Whoops. Now I'm losing my iPad. Because like I said, I have more men over here who are talking. Yeah, now let's talk about, before I wrap it up today, because some of you, Drew's making a good point on Instagram. Some of you I've seen some of the points that you've made over on TikTok as well, is that what about narcissism? How does the abuse with narcissists wrap up into all of this? Yes, narcissists, whether they're men or women, are going to both cause problems. They're going to weaponize sexuality. What are men saying over on Instagram? What men are saying is, one says, I wish I could find a woman like you. And another one says, I feel really bad for my son. Another is, my wife is weaponizing sex so that I can't get any love in the relationship, which that's why, and I also saw the same thing is, And then the same guy said, I give her everything she needs, but she won't stay in one place. So there's a lot of grief. What I'm hearing is a lot of pain on the men's side over here on Instagram. I probably have 25 to 30% of the people on Instagram are men. So I'm able to sort of see that. And I wish they were over here on TikTok, because primarily over on TikTok, guys, it's mostly women who are here. But both genders weaponize, whether they're male or female narcissists, they're weaponize sexuality. Very, very much so. And they do that because they know that that's a great way to hurt you. And it's a great way to also degrade you. It's a way for them to say, you're not important. I don't want you. I don't need you. I'm going to look elsewhere. I want to relegate you to a corner of my life. You are not anybody to me. That's how they kind of do that. So it's very, very painful when it happens. Very painful. And that's what happened in my relationship with a narcissistic sociopath, is that sex for us was over before we were married, actually. I didn't know that. I didn't know that until he made it very clear on our honeymoon night, or wedding night, that sex was over. It was not a part of my, if you read my book, you know that he wasn't present. It was horrible. I mean, he basically removed himself from our relationship from then on. It was primarily a con. My ex pursued me for money. That's why I got in a relationship. I didn't know it was a con. So there I told you the end of my book is that I discovered that it was never love. It was all about the money, which is so sad. So yes, but that's true for a lot of us. You know, it's a lot of us who get into an abusive relationship. It's about something. They get into it because you're supply in some way. Maybe the fantasy of what they think they could have with you. Maybe it's the fantasy of I know that some women who have been writing, or I'm sorry, making TikTok. I read Bree's, like, she loved the book. Thank you, Bree. I know some people who are on TikTok who are very handsome women, very beautiful women, say that some men get into a relationship just because they want a beautiful woman. And so they see this person as having that woman, and they become sort of the candy on the arm. I think women do it to men. We do it sort of like a sugar daddy thing, or we look at men as for safety or some kind of a extraneous thing. So it's not just men doing it to women. Women are also doing it to men. I don't just want to make it, one-sided. So yeah. Oh, I need to make it better. Poor Instagram. You guys are so patient. I mean, this image is bad. You're getting a side view of me. And then, there you go. And then I just clicked the wrong button. So I'm trying to film it on 3 cameras, which is the tricky part, how to make it. All right, Wally just said, my late father gave me a note and said, your woman always comes first. My comment was, Pop, your spelling is incorrect. And he goes, no, son, you need to think about it. That's why Emily's book, Come As You Are. That's what she means. It's exactly what she's talking about. Exactly. So any final things before we need to talk about before we wrap up today that you want me to hit on before I end it? Thank you so much, Jennifer. I'm glad that it's scary for me because TikTok bans people's accounts. That's why I don't know if those of you who are on Instagram realize we use code words for reasons. We're not supposed to use the word starting with an S when it talks about when we don't want to live anymore. We're not supposed to use that word. That's why we don't talk about sex a whole lot on this platform, is because it was primarily a minors platform for kids. And so they have and I just heard this, and I've seen it, guys. So there's this thing that happens where young girls, minors, get on and they do things like bend over late at night for lives, and then they get money from men. So TikTok's got a problem with child pornography. So, we will find any creative way to do very toxic things with even the best platforms. I find it so sad. So sad. So, so Emily Nagoski wrote, is there one? Yeah, reading Come As You Are Now for the male perspective. She comes first. Yeah, she comes first is the male's perspective. You're right, exactly. So there was a question that came on TikTok or Instagram. Can we talk about hoovering and genuine willingness to change? How do we know when we've left a partner that there is a genuine willingness to change versus that we're being hoovered? Great question. I love that. Thank you for asking that. So let's talk about that, and that will be my final wrap up today and I'll be live again on Thursday at 1 p.m. and I may be sporting a different wig. You may see me as an Auburn. And also I'm going to go right now over to YouTube and hang out with anybody who wants to talk about what I talked about on Thursday, which is, I don't remember right now, but if you want to be over there and chat with me, I'd love to chat with you. So let's talk about how do we know it's real change versus just they just want you back because they don't want life to change. So when there's real change, you will see a change on all fronts. You'll see this person doing very hard work. They're going to be digging in and doing therapy on their own. They're going to be approaching, if they've got kids with you or other kids, you'll be seeing them approach the children differently. They will be getting their life straightened up around work, their work life, their financial life. You'll see them do all sorts of massive changes, and they'll be accountable. You'll see them build in accountability, like maybe they get a mentor, maybe they're seeing a regular therapist. You'll see something that says to you, this person's taking it very seriously. It's not just, I want my cushy life back. In fact, they if it's real, they may even say to you, you should not come back with me. What I did with you was so horrific. I don't deserve a second chance. They'll be so remorseful, and there's so much ownership. And then there'll be this accountability, this natural accountability to never make you feel scared or threatened again. And it usually takes a lot of time before that happens, before that kind of do-over. I mean, I'm basically talking about a massive do-over. You'll see this incredible time spent, and you'll see them not focusing on another relationship. They won't have jumped in to another relationship to fix things. They will working on fixing themselves. Now, as you can tell, based on what I just said, how many people do you know who's doing that? I don't. That's a lot of work. Most of us are not that determined. We're not that disciplined. We're not that mature. We just want a cushy, comfortable life. We want things to be the way they were. We just don't want our life tore apart, right? So that's probably what's happening is most hoovering is either because they're bored, they're in between relationships, because life is harder without you than they expected, because they're jealous of what you're now doing and going on, and they'd like to come back and sort of ruin it for you or hurt you or get it from you. But or maybe they just kind of miss access to the family or the whatever it is that you gave them access to. They're missing that. But rarely is it this massive, responsible, mature, taking accounting of themselves and really getting themselves together on multiple levels. It's rare. So that's why most of the time, I'm going to bet you 95% or more, it's probably being hoovered. Probably. So that was a fantastic question. Thank you so much for asking it for me. I appreciate that. That's a great ending today. I will be back on Thursday, and I can't wait to hang out with you guys then. And, by the way, I still am waiting for subscribers on TikTok to message me with a question. I have followed all of my subscribers on TikTok. Please message me a question so that I can take it and talk to you about it at the next live. I can't wait to do that. So if you're a subscriber of mine and you were here today, I can't wait to hear from you. You guys, you have access to me now on TikTok, so please message me. So thank you so much for both of you guys hanging out with me, both groups, Instagram and TikTok. I will keep working on this so it's a better image. Plus my autofocus, which I don't get that either. It's a fuzzy image. It's really weird. All right, you guys, I love all of you so much. I'll see you.